So, what you say holds a tremendous amount of power. There is an energy to the words that you say. And so, if there is a disconnect, if you're not speaking the truth, that has a resonant effect on your cells. This is not just some like, oh, it's not good to lie. It actually has an effect on the physiology of the body because the body knows when you're telling the truth or when you're not telling the truth, and there are ramifications for that. Welcome to the world of energy, where science meets spirit. Ancient wisdom merges with cutting-edge knowledge, and the possibilities for a healthier, happier you are endless. I'm Lauren Walker.
And I'm Blaine Wilkes. This is Energy Works, your portal into the incredible world of energy medicine. Whether you're a seasoned energy practitioner seeking to deepen your knowledge or someone new to the concept of energy medicine, this podcast was created for you. Together, we unravel the intricate threads of energy that weave through our lives, revealing practical insights, stories, and actionable tools you can start using right away.
Join us on this captivating journey through the world of energy right here and learn how energy works. Hey everybody, welcome back. Episode 5 of Energy Works. It has been such a journey so far, so interesting talking to you all about what we think are the most important tenets to understand about energy. I'm here with Blaine, and today we are going to talk about communication. So just to recap a little bit, because we've been building on this foundation, we've started with grounding. When you're going to work with energy, the first thing you want to do is ground that energy. The second thing is that crossover pattern, which leads to creativity, which is your natural default selection is creativity. You are a creative being. And so we want to get the energies to support that creativity. Then we come into the energy of power. How do we empower that energy? We start to understand the differentiation between what is beneficial for me, what is not beneficial for me, which you could really simplify with like good and bad, right? What is good for me, what is bad for me? And that really comes from a place of power, of increasing our own power and energetically understanding that we have to get our energy empowered so that we can move forward. Then we, of course, we come into love, which is the substrate of all healing. And then we learn that there are energies that actually support our ability to love ourselves more, to become better at healing, and to bring that love out into the rest of the energy systems and the rest of our lives. And so the next piece of working with your energy is communication. Because when we're learning about energy, one of the things we need to know is that this is a language. So we need to know how this language works and how we can communicate in this language. And how we work with communication energetically also speaks to how we work with the world, because our communication is our direct feedback loop with the world, our direct connection to the world. We communicate to the world, and the world communicates back to us. We communicate with our bodies communicate back to us. So understanding communication from both an energetic perspective and from just a life perspective is one of the most important things that we feel we want to share with you. So I'll turn it over to Blaine and see what she has to say about this idea of communication.
Yeah, thanks, Lauren. The communication within the body, I'll start with that because one thing I know I'm guilty of is ignoring the communication that my body is trying to tell me. And I think we've all heard the adage, your body will speak to you in whispers. And if you don't acknowledge, it will start to speak to you a little louder. And if you don't acknowledge, it will start yelling at you. And then, eventually, whatever the issue is, will just command your attention. But as humans, we have these really incredible intellects. We have these incredible brains. And so our ability to ignore the whisper or say, I'll deal with that tomorrow, or if it's something very physical, I'll make that doctor's appointment next week is very powerful. I mean, we other beings around this planet sharing this planet with us don't have such strong intellects and have more intuitiveness, right? I'm getting a message like our pets or whatever that, something's a little bit wrong. They know, they honor, they listen, they pay attention. Where we have maybe some goals or a full schedule that day or children to take care of or a boss who wants things from us, right? And so we, instead of listening to our own body, we just override, 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 override. And in the ancient traditions, like the two oldest healthcare systems in the world, India and China, that's what makes you sick. Is this disconnect between the alignment of yourself and the messages from the body. It also applies in Western medicine, but often the medical practitioners in Western medicine are kind of looking more at the symptom of the problem and not the what was all going on that let the problem escalate to the point that it has that you warranted this attention. And so I think that is a super powerful thing with communication that directly affects our energy because our energy is even listening to the mind, the energy is listening to the thoughts, then the energy is noticing what we do and don't do. And then just reacting and adapting and making new energetic pathways and compensating and doing the best it can do to the point that we've pushed it so far that we're sick.
And exactly what you talked about really brings our point about coming into balance into play here. We've talked about this polarity in every episode of that there's a container and it's between these oppositional forces that we find that balance in the middle. And it's the same thing with communication. A lot of times when we think about communication, we think, I'm going to tell you something. I'm going to communicate to you something. And we go along with those lines of if we're, do a spiritual practice or we're, trying to be kind and aware, we have those three tenets. Is it, is it true? Is it necessary? Is it kind? Right? These are Buddhist tenets of communication, of talking. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to tell you my truth. Is it true? Yes, it is. Is it necessary? I really need to tell you this. Is it kind? Now I need to think about that for a minute. But it's all still through the lens of I'm going to talk and tell you something. And the truth is, here's the true and the necessary, and here I think is also kind, is that communication is a feedback loop. And that's what you're talking about when you say that we need to listen to the physiology of the body and the energies of the body that are constantly communicating to us. That's the other side of communication. It's not just me saying something to you, it's you saying something back to me integrating that, and then me saying the next thing. It's like yes and, yes and, yes and. And it starts with us being able to listen to what our own energy systems, our own bodies, our own intuitions are saying to us. That's really the depth of this energetic communication piece that we're starting to build and work with. And then once that becomes balanced, then the sort of more common idea of communication, of how I communicate out into the world, that is already grounded in this beautiful metaphor, not even a metaphor, of this feedback loop. I'm going to listen to the information and then I'm going to communicate and then I'm going to listen. And it's this back and forth instead of this one way channel of, let me tell you how it is.
Yeah, you did kind of the figure eight with your hands there when you were speaking, right? The figure eight is an incredibly powerful shape or geometry in our energy field. And so when Lauren was talking, she was using her hand with this. She drew a figure eight, like speak, receive and listen, speak, receive and listen, speak, receive and listen. And this infinity, the figure eight is also the sign for infinity, this going on and on and on and on. It's like it's never done, this continuing. And the voice, using our voice, because we have all this internal communication. I've talked about the mean voice in my head on a previous podcast episode that we have done. And so this internal dialogue that we have, and then the external dialogue that we have, can be beneficial or can be harmful. And there's pattern and habit loops that happen with that. It's just so deep. And the receiving, I think, can sometimes be the hardest part, depending on what type of person you are. I think some of us want to, or give and receive, right? Some of us want to give, 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 but aren't as good on the receiving. Some of us receive, 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 and aren't as good at the giving. And so depending on what our makeup, either just naturally how we are or how we were conditioned in childhood or the way that we have been adaptive, maybe we learned that our speaking was harmful, and so it's better to just keep it inside. And so all little hurdles that we have to overcome to have this truly balanced communication. And Lauren, we talked before we hit record about vocalizing it with your voice, because then it's just real. It's just, there's the thinking about talking about something. And then the second it flies out of your mouth, we know you can't take it back. And so being mindful and conscious and kind, as you said, as to what comes out of our mouth, because not only may it be not kind for someone else, ultimately we know because of that figure eight, it's going to be not kind right back at us.
It's so important how what you say out into the world. It is, we talk about this in energy medicine yoga, but I've also seen this, on walls in psychotherapy offices or in medical offices, of your word being your vow, your word being your truth. And that's really like even baked into our language, I'm good for it. My word is my bond, right? That's something that has been said for time immemorial. My word is my bond. And so what you say holds a tremendous amount of power. There is an energy to the words that you say. And so if there is a disconnect, if you're not speaking the truth, that has a resonant effect on your cells. This is not just some like, oh, it's not good to lie. It actually has an effect on the physiology of the body, because the body knows when you're telling a truth or when you're not telling the truth, and there are ramifications for that. And one of the other things that's so important about speaking, I mean, all of the mechanisms for speech are kind of the throat and from the nose, between the nose and the collarbone, really, are all the mechanisms for speech. Now, there's other kinds of communication. Obviously, sign language is a communication. Writing is communication. We communicate in all of the artistic endeavors that we do. But I want to just speak for a moment of the speaking, using the mouth, the tongue, the teeth, the voice box, the thyroid and parathyroid, which are also in the throat, which have been skyrocketing in modern day of the issues with the thyroid, parathyroid. And if you look at any of the kind of unconscious between different elements. If you look at Louise Hay, for example, she talks about the thyroid, and the question that comes up is, when is it going to be my turn? So there's this whole kind of group of people that have been silenced, that have had their voices taken away, that haven't been able to speak up at all. And that has a physiological effect on your physiology as well as on your mind, right? It's a really powerful effect to not be able to speak, not be able to speak your truth, to be silenced. And so that is really something important to talk about when we talk about communication, of how you can find your voice and find how you want to contribute to the commons, how each of us shows up. We've talked about that we are all creative beings, and it's through your communication, through your voice, through your signing, that you are communicating your creativity to the world. And so to be able to have the energies around that balanced give you the tools to be able to bring your light to the world. I mean, that's how you're communicating. That is your connection and your engagement with the world is how you communicate.
I love that. Yes, all of the ways we move through the world, we're communicating. Definitely not just with how we speak. And then back to the figure eight, the world receiving, are we communicating what the world wants? And is it in the highest and best good for what the world wants? I can tell you when I was in corporate, I was not in alignment with my higher self. My job was not in alignment with my higher self. The what I had to do every day was not in alignment with my higher self. I was, I was quite disconnected, and there were a lot of side effects, including the mean voice in my head and drinking too much alcohol and punishing myself in other ways. It was all just side effects that were coming forth because I was not communicating with universe, with divine intelligence. I was not in the highest and best alignment of my good or of the good that I know that I can do. I think I was doing harm, actually. I was doing harm and not doing good to myself and probably the world. And, from the vegan perspective, that's where a lot of people find themselves. It's like this cognitive dissonance where eating animals is not in the highest alignment from an environmental perspective or a compassion perspective. They don't really want to do it, but they still are. And so they've kind of created this cognitive dissonance. And it's one of those ripples that goes out. They're not in for that particular person, and we all have different alignment with our highest and best forms of good. But for those particular individuals, they're seeking to find alignment, so they're trying to find a coach to help them with their diet or learn more about the lifestyle or whatever it is, or even our creative endeavors or our entrepreneurial endeavors. What are we putting out into the world? That is our communication with the world. And does the world want it? And that figure eight coming back at us, if the world doesn't want it, then we get that message. And we have to try again.
Absolutely. And there's two pieces to that too, because so that feedback loop is very strong. And I want to give a couple of stories here. The first being Vincent van Gogh. And many of you know him, very famous artist. Nobody wanted anything that he did. His whole life, I think he sold one or two paintings, one to his brother and one to a cousin or an uncle or something. His whole life. I think paintings of his now are selling for maybe hundreds of millions of dollars. But in his lifetime, nobody wanted what he was doing. Nobody. Nobody wanted it. But he had his communication that he had to put out into the world, and he was gonna do it no matter what. He lived a very poor life. He didn't have a lot of money, didn't have a lot of food. He had mental issues that he never had adequate support for, but he was going to communicate his light, his inner light, and he did for his entire life. And he also paid a price for that the lack of acceptance from the world probably contributed to his mental health issues, as well as probably licking the ends of his paintbrushes, which were lead, is one of the stories I heard as well. Not so good for his mental health. Um, so there's two pieces to this feedback loop. There's one of you need to put out your light, period. I know I had an uprise at the end of that sentence, but actually, as soon as I said it, that was it. That's the sentence. You need to put out your light. You need to do what it is that only you do. Only Vincent van Gogh paints like him. And he had to do who he was. He had to do, that was his dharma, to do his work, even though he wasn't getting any love back from the rest of the world. And then there's the other piece of that feedback loop where you are very responsive to what the rest of the world is of what it is that you're putting out. And so I'll give you an example from my own life. I've written 3 books that have been published by major publishing companies, but I've written many, 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 many books. And before my first book, Energy Medicine Yoga, got published, I had written 2 books, I think, about yoga. And at that time, I was having a real challenge in the yoga world. I was really surprised at the true lack of what I considered spirituality and compassion and generosity and kindness. And I actually wrote a book called The Mean Girls of Yoga, based off that movie Mean Girls, Tina Fey wrote, because I felt like that's what I felt like I was in this clique back in high school. It was completely the antithesis of what I wanted the yoga world to be and what my experience in the yoga world actually was. And so I wrote this book. And then I reworked it and I wrote it again called Lie on the Mat, like a little wordplay on lying down on the mat or the lie that I was, under from my experiences in the yoga world. And crickets. Nobody wanted that. Nobody wanted to read my book, my expose, my, hard done by experiences. Nobody wanted to read it. Nobody. Crickets. Rejection, 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 rejection. I couldn't get an agent. I couldn't get a publisher. Nobody wanted to read it. So that was the feedback loop. And I was really bummed. I will be totally honest. I was really bummed about that. I'd worked so hard on this. Nobody cared. And then I wrote Energy Medicine Yoga, and it got published so fast. It's like crazy. It is so hard to get a book published in the world by a major publisher. And it happened with such ease. I was like, what? I just got swooped away. The feedback loop was everybody wanted to understand how energy works in their body. Everybody wanted to learn how to heal themselves using simple techniques. Everybody was ready for a paradigm shift in the traditional yoga world from the practices that people had been doing that weren't giving them the promises that yoga was. Everybody was ready for energy medicine yoga. And that feedback loop went back and forth. Another book, another book. This information needs to get out in the world. So there are these communication pathways that you're going to either come up against no, or you're going to come up against into a flow. And you need to be able to respond to both of those with the things that we've already talked about, your own grounding, your own creativity, sense of personal power, sense of self-love. On some level, Van Gogh loved himself so much that he didn't care that nobody loved what he was doing. He loved it, and that was enough for him. And so that's sort of where we're going with this energetic piece is, do you need to adjust your sails or you just keep sailing? And either way, you're responsible for the choices that you make reflective of the energy patterns that you've been building up. I just talked for a really long time, but Blaine, I'd love your feedback on that. Feedback. That's the feedback loop. I just spoke. Now I'm going to listen to Blaine's response.
That is such a great story. And it is all your internal knowing, right? Do I push through like Van Gogh, right? I'm just gonna nobody cares. I'm gonna keep painting and painting and keep painting. Or do you shop out, lie on the mat to more and more publishers? Or what's the point that you say, okay, I'm gonna try a different thing. I'm gonna try a different book. And that's only we know, right? And and it's hard to know. It's like this subtle knowing. And I think I love that story. I recently wrote a newsletter to my newsletter community, and it was basically on commitment and showing up for yourself. And there's a lot of new science around, when you try something and then quit, then your likelihood of quitting the next thing gets exponentially higher. And then your likelihood of, it's just, you're creating this, it's very tied to the reward system of the brain. You're basically, you're giving the feedback, oh, I quit. I'm so relieved. I don't have to do that anymore. And so you're creating this pattern that quit equals relief. And so this balance of pushing through and showing up for yourself and not quitting. And this particular newsletter was in the realm of diet and exercise and journaling and meditation and kind of that self-help, showing up for yourself. But I always get emails back when I write newsletters, which I love. I love to hear, because really, ultimately, I want to know what people think. They don't have to agree with me, just that they think something. And someone basically was like, quitting means to let go, Blaine. And I totally appreciated that point of view. And so when we're talking about this communication, right, and trying to put things out into the world, or trying to be an activist, or trying to change the way people do things, and that is your truth, and the vibration coming back is not seeming to be receptive, Like, when do you stop or when do you shift? And I don't think Lauren or I have the answer to that. That's just that deep knowing inside of you on like why am I here? What is my light? How, and then you just have to know that your journey is your journey and however it ends up being is perfect for you. But we just try and listen and try and listen and try and listen and keep going down the road here on Earth School. But
I
I know,
wanna I
Lauren, you
wanna
have a
add to that.
go ahead.
I wanna tag team yeah, I wanna tag team on that for a second because I think that I wanna expand on that story. You try and you listen, you try and you listen, but also you're adjusting your sails to that feedback loop. So if I were to look at those books, those first 2 books, Lie on the Mat, Mean Girls Yoga, and if I were to look at what am I putting out? What was my impetus and what was I putting out? Was I really putting out my light, my truth, my joy? Was I putting this out in service to anyone? Or was kind of it a revenge book a little bit? Like here were all the girls that were so mean to me and I'm going to call them out even though I never called anyone by name. You could put it together or you just as this whole as a whole you could sort of see where I was going. It wasn't necessarily of great service to anybody except my ego. And the world was like, "Nah, we don't really need to deal with your ego. You go deal with that. You're on your own." And then you got some other light. Let's put that out to the world and see what that is. And when I came back with a work that was of great service, that had nothing to do with me, nothing to do with my ego, was not going to like give me the whatever I thought I was gonna get from those first 2 books. That was the book that flew. The book that was full of my light, not full of my uncertainty or my ego or my self-aggrandizement or my bitterness or all of that. And when you look at Van Gogh's work, you are seeing his light. Even the dark pieces, you are seeing how he has transmuted this darkness into this beautiful light of his soul. And so, as a writer, way back in kindergarten writing 101, it's like, if you're going to be a professional writer, only do it because you can't not do it. So, that communication, it's like you're doing this because it is bursting out of you. It is your greatest gift inside of you, and you're going to make sure that that gift comes out of you, whether it's read or not. And I'll tell you this, I'm glad that those 2 books aren't read 100%, that they are not out there. I'm really glad. And if energy medicine yoga hadn't been picked up, I probably would have self-published it or somehow got it out in another way because I knew that was the work that needed to be out into the world. And so there's that feedback loop of understanding what your motivations are. Is it from an imbalance of your power? Do you need to go back and kind of work those belly points again and find out like, oh, what is that? Oh, I was jealous that that other person got that and I didn't. That's why I'm doing this. That's not really a great motivation for anything, right? So I just wanted to bring that out because I think our motivation for our communication is also just incredibly important. It brings that idea back of that consciousness and our conscience to our communication as well.
Yeah, thank you for saying all that. Back to the highest and best good. Is this for the highest and best good? Or is this for something else? In this whole yogic vernacular of speak your truth, when I'm trying to decide if I'm going to speak my truth and I'm feeling some hesitation, or if I say this, could it hurt somebody, but should I say it anyway? And having that kind of dialogue, I do always ask myself, what is in the greater good? And why do I think I need to say something, and for whom does it serve? And often the answer is exactly what you said. It serves my ego. It serves my needing to be right. It's not in service of the other person. They're not really going to get anything from that. And that's my feedback to myself to deal with my own thing and move on. So do you want to teach the
Yeah.
technique to help us balance our
Yeah.
energy So our energies are in alignment with trying to help our little brains figure out what the right thing to do is.
Yes, yes, exactly. And again, back to the wisdom of the energy body that really transcends any of the other wisdoms that we have available to us. And so this is called the Thai flow, and it takes place on the neck because that is where the impetus for your speech begins, the tongue and all of the muscles that connect the back of the tongue through the throat, and actually the muscles that connect in behind the heart. And there's another piece that I'll talk about on the throat for just a moment. It's a bone called the hyoid bone. And if you kind of bring your fingers, you can hear my voice is starting to get buzzy now as I grab onto it. It's a little bit above your Adam's apple. And it's a little horseshoe, and it's the only bone in the body that is not connected to any other bone directly. It is not connected to any other bone. It's only connected to muscles and tendons and ligaments, to the tongue, and then to that ligamental structures that come in and connect behind the heart. And my teacher, Donna Eden, talks about the hyoid bone as being the gyroscope around which the whole body find its center. And that bone is connected to the tongue and the heart, and it's how you communicate. It is directly connected to your communication. So the vows that you make with every word that you speak is the central point of which the whole body organizes itself. So I want to start with that, and then I'm going to show you this technique that is going to help you clear the static out of the signal of the throat area where your speech originates, and help to bring balance to that energy so that the energy can rise up in a direct connective line from your toes really to the heavens. That's really the alignment that we want our communication to be with. We want to feel grounded and creative, powerful and loving, and then that's what we want to express out into the world. And so by clearing this area of the throat with this very simple technique, you're helping to clear the energies of the ego, the half truths, the not kindnesses, all of those kind of things. We're literally clearing them out of the fields of energy in the body. So here's how it goes. It's really simple to do. So I'm going to take both of my hands to the right side of my neck. And I'm even wrapping my fingers slightly around so I'm a little bit on the back of the neck. I'm going to take an inhaled breath and then smooth my fingers around the front of my throat, across my neck, all the way over to the left side. Now, this is really interesting because a lot of people feel a lot of feels about their neck. And this is a really beautiful way to get your fingers into the flesh itself, into the energy fields in a really loving way. So again, fingers come all the way around to the right side, slightly behind. Take an inhale and then smooth both hands across the throat all the way over to the other side, and then just release and shake off your hands. We'll do one more. Inhale and smooth your fingers across the whole neck, all the way over to the left side, and then shake them off. And then we're just going to do that exact same thing the other direction. So your fingers come to the left side of the neck and even slightly behind the neck there. Take an inhale and exhale with intentionality, with love, fingers deep into the flesh of the body, right at the neck, all the way across to the right side, and then release and let them go. And come again to the left side. Inhale. And as you exhale, drag your hands across the neck. One more time. Inhale, fingers come to the left side of the neck, and slowly, deeply, and lovingly pull your fingers across to the right side and shake them off. Take a couple of deep breaths here. What you've done is clear this horizontal flow of energy that connects the head to the body. So allowing a more smooth flow of information up and down, which means the heart is able to express through the mouth, the ears are able to take in information, digest into the heart, back and forth, because this area is cleared of this interfering energy. So you should feel really good right now. Take another deep breath. You can exhale out the mouth. And if you've got any big meetings or conversations to have with somebody, do that first.
Thanks, Lauren. I do feel really clear in that throat area. So, Thai flow. It's funny, whenever I hear Thai flow, I always think like THAI because of Thai massage, but this is Thai flow like necktie, just so you know. That's why we call it that because it's around the neck, and it's yeah, this beautiful way to clear energetic gunk from around the neck area. So let's wrap up for this podcast on communication. It's been really fun. We went a little long today. I think we have a lot to say about communicating. So I hope that you all learned something and feel free to leave us a review, and we'll see you next time on Energy Works. Alrighty, Energy fans, that's a wrap on another positively charged episode of Energy Works. Lauren, this is the part where we get to use our energy puns.
It's been electrifying, hasn't it, Blaine? We hope you've enjoyed it as much as we have.
If you're feeling amped up and you want to keep your energy flowing, be sure to hit that subscribe button on your favorite podcast platform.
And we'd love to hear from you, so please take a moment to leave us a review. Your feedback helps us continue to deliver content that resonates, so light up our inbox.
And spark a conversation with your friends to tell them about us. And we'll see you next time on Energy Works.